All right, so we've talked about some pretty impactful people in history, right? But I think it's safe to say few have cast a shadow quite like Adolf Hitler. And, it's so easy to get caught up in the enormity of what he did, the sheer scale of the horrors.
It's almost overwhelming, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And because of that, we often kind of skip over those early years. We jump right to the dictator, the monster. But I think to really grasp how someone becomes that, well, we need to go back further, back to the beginning.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's easy to think of these figures as almost predetermined, right? Like they were always destined to become the villains we know them as.
Yeah, like it was inevitable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's so much more complicated than that. And to really understand, you have to look at their lives, their experiences, the world they were born into. And I think that's what we're going to do today, isn't it?
That's exactly it. We're going to unpack those formative years, see what shaped him, what events, what ideas took root. Now, full disclaimer, right? We're not here to excuse or downplay anything.
Of course not.
The goal is to understand, not to condone.
Absolutely.
So, with that said, let's start at the very beginning. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889. Braunau am Inn, a small town in Austria. His father was a minor official, pretty strict by all accounts. His mother, on the other hand, very protective. And it's a little bit eerie, but 4 of his siblings actually died before he was even born.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's got to have an impact.
Yeah, you'd think so, wouldn't you? And it's interesting because later on, he actually kind of rewrote his own childhood story a bit. Changed some details, emphasized others.
Really? Like what kind of changes?
Well, it's hard to say for sure what his intentions were, but it makes you think, doesn't it? Was he trying to create a certain image, maybe one of struggle, of overcoming hardship?
Right. Crafting a narrative. That's something we see a lot with these figures, isn't it?
It really is. It's like they're trying to retroactively justify their actions. But let's move on a bit. Now, academically, he wasn't really a star pupil, but he was intelligent. That much is clear. And he loved to read. I mean, he devoured books.
So, a curious mind then.
Absolutely. But he was much more into self-education. He wasn't really interested in the structured, formal learning environment. And that's kind of an important point, isn't it? Because it shows a certain independence, I guess, a desire to learn on his own terms.
And that could be a double-edged sword, can't it? I mean, that kind of intellectual curiosity is great, but without the guidance, the critical thinking that comes with proper education, well, it can lead someone down some pretty dangerous paths.
Exactly. He was forming his own worldview. But without those checks and balances, without exposure to different perspectives, he became vulnerable to extreme ideas. Now, fast forward a bit. 1907, Hitler moves to Vienna. This is where he wants to become an artist. And Vienna at the time was this incredible hub of creativity, philosophy, all sorts of intellectual currents swirling around.
Must have been quite a change from his small town upbringing.
Oh, absolutely. So he applies to the Academy of Fine Arts, but he's rejected.
Oh.
Yeah. And, it's easy to dismiss that as just, oh, well, he wasn't good enough. But I think it's more than that. This rejection, coupled with his own understanding of art's power, that's a potent combination. It planted the seeds for how he would later use imagery, symbols, propaganda to manipulate and control.
So even though he wasn't successful as an artist himself,
yeah,
he recognized how art could be weaponized.
Precisely. He may not have been able to create it, but he knew how to use it. And it's during his time in Vienna that he starts frequenting cafes, engaging in these intellectual circles. And, it's often said that Vienna is where his anti-Semitism really took hold. And yeah, there was anti-Jewish sentiment there before World War I. But here's the thing. Some of his early interactions with Jewish people were actually positive.
Really? Like who?
Well, his family doctor was Jewish, and there was an art dealer he dealt with who was Jewish as well. And these weren't just fleeting encounters. These were people he had relationships with. So it's not a simple black and white picture, is it?
That's really interesting. It adds a layer of complexity to it all.
Yeah.
Because it shows that it's not just about being in a certain place at a certain time. There are personal experiences, individual relationships that come into play.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show human beings are complicated. Our beliefs, our prejudices, they're not formed in a vacuum. It's a mix of personal experience, social influences, and, just plain old human fallibility.
And how those things interact, that's the key, isn't it? Figuring out what tipped the scales, what pushed him towards those hateful ideologies.
Exactly. Now, in 1913, he moves to Munich. And this move is driven by his strong German nationalist feelings. He identifies far more with Germany than with Austria-Hungary, which at the time was an empire in decline.
Right. Austria-Hungary was kind of crumbling under its own weight, wasn't it?
It was. It was this patchwork of different ethnicities, different nationalities, all vying for power. The government was constantly in turmoil. And I think this is really important because it shaped Hitler's view of democracy. He saw this ineffective parliamentary system, this constant infighting, and he concluded that only a strong centralized authority could bring order.
So chaos breeds a desire for control.
That's a good way to put it. And it's in this context, in this world on the brink, that World War I breaks out. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, that's the spark. And within weeks, Europe is at war. Now, here's something interesting. Even though he's an Austrian citizen living in Munich, Hitler volunteers for the German army. He doesn't wait to be conscripted by Austria. He actively chooses to fight for Germany.
Wow, that really shows how deep his German nationalism ran, even then.
It does, doesn't it? He's not fighting for the Habsburgs. He's fighting for what he sees as the German nation. And his experience in the war, it's going to have a profound impact on him.
I can imagine. I mean, war changes people.
It does. He serves on the Western Front as a corporal, a battalion runner. It's a dangerous job. He's running messages under fire, witnessing the horrors firsthand. He's even gassed in 1918.
So he was right in the thick of it.
He was. And while he later mythologized his war experience quite a bit, presented himself as this heroic frontline soldier, the reality is a bit more nuanced. But the point is, he experienced the brutality of war, the camaraderie, the loss.
And the defeat. We can't forget the defeat.
You're right. And that defeat, that's going to be crucial. Now, he was awarded the Iron Cross, both second and first class. And it's worth noting the Iron Cross first class, that was actually on the recommendation of a Jewish superior officer.
Huh. That's not something you hear very often.
It's not, is it? And it just goes to show how complex history is. But back to the defeat. The end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, those are huge turning points, not just for Germany, but for Hitler personally.
Because they feed into that sense of grievance, that feeling of being wronged.
Exactly. The defeat itself was a shock to many Germans. They'd been told victory was near, and suddenly it's all over. Then comes the Treaty of Versailles. And this treaty, it's harsh. Germany has to accept responsibility for the war. They lose territory. Their military is severely limited, and they're saddled with massive reparations.
Talk about adding insult to injury.
It was. And this fueled this widespread resentment, this humiliation. People were looking for someone to blame, someone to explain how it all went wrong. And that's where the stab in the back theory comes in.
Ah, yes. The idea that Germany was betrayed from within.
Exactly. And Hitler, he latches onto this theory. He blames socialists, Marxists, Jews. He claims they undermine the war effort, weaken Germany from the inside. Now, this wasn't a mainstream view. Most historians reject this theory.
One of conspiracy theory, really.
It is, but it was a powerful one. It offered a simple explanation, a scapegoat. And it played on existing prejudices. So after the war, Hitler stays involved with the army, which is now drastically reduced. He even attends courses that focus on ethno-nationalism and patriotism.
Ethno-nationalism. So a really strong emphasis on German identity and national interests.
That's it. And it's actually the army that recruits him to give speeches. They want him to counter leftist ideas. And it's here that he discovers his talent for oratory.
So the very people who are trying to suppress certain ideologies actually gave him the platform to hone his skills.
It's ironic, isn't it? And he's good. I mean, really good. He has this charisma, this ability to connect with people's emotions, their anger, their fear, their hopes. And he channels all of that into this potent message of national revival.
He's a master manipulator.
He is. And in 1919, he joins the German Workers' Party in Munich. It's a small fringe group founded by a guy named Anton Drexler, who has links to the nationalist Thule Society.
The Thule Society, weren't they kind of an occult group?
They were, yeah, into all sorts of esoteric stuff. But the point is, this German Workers' Party, their core beliefs are extreme nationalism, racial purity, anti-Semitism, all the things we associate with Nazism.
So he finds his tribe, so to speak.
He does. And he quickly rises through the ranks. He becomes their head of propaganda because he understands that messaging is key. And in 1920, he changes the party's name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party.
A much catchier name, I guess.
And it broadened their appeal a bit. It made them sound more inclusive. But their core ideology remained the same. Extreme, right-wing, ultra-nationalist. Now, by 1921, he's the party's president. And he starts gathering this inner circle around him. Hess, Goering, Himmler, Goebbels. These are names that'll become infamous.
Yeah, real rogues gallery.
Yeah. And they're all united by this shared sense of loss after the war, this belief that Germany was betrayed, humiliated, and of course they're all drawn to Hitler's charisma, his message of strength and revival.
He's the figurehead, the leader they've been waiting for.
He is. And then in 1922, something happens that really inspires Hitler. Mussolini's March on Rome.
Ah, yes. When Mussolini and his fascists seized power in Italy.
That's it. And it gives Hitler an idea. He wants to do the same in Germany. So in November 1923, he launches the Beer Hall Putsch in Munich.
The beer hall putsch. Wasn't that kind of a disaster?
It was. It was poorly planned, poorly executed. He tries to seize power by force, but it fails miserably. He's arrested, put on trial for treason.
So a setback then.
Yeah, a big one. But it's not the end. In fact, in some ways, it's a beginning, because it allows the Nazis to create martyrs out of those who died in the putsch. And the blood flag, the flag they carried, supposedly stained with their blood, it becomes the sacred relic.
They're turning defeat into a rallying cry.
Exactly. They're building a myth.
Okay.
And Hitler's trial, well, he gets a surprisingly lenient sentence. 5 years in prison, but he ends up serving less than 1. And he's temporarily banned from public speaking.
So not exactly a harsh punishment.
No. And even the speaking ban, it kind of backfires, because it gives him time to write. And what does he write? Mein Kampf.
His manifesto.
His blueprint for everything. It lays out his ideology, his plans for Germany, his hatred for Jews, his vision of racial purity and world domination. And while it wasn't an immediate bestseller, its sales explode once he comes to power.
So it's a testament to the power of propaganda.
It is. It shows how a hateful ideology, packaged the right way, can spread and take root. Now, in the late 1920s, the speaking ban is lifted. Hitler's back on the scene. And this coincides with a period of economic recovery in Germany. The Dawes Plan brings in American investment. Things are starting to look up.
So not exactly the ideal climate for extremism.
No. And support for the Nazis, it actually dips during this time. But then comes 1929, the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression.
Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah. And Germany, they're hit hard. Unemployment skyrockets. People lose their savings, their homes. There's this feeling of despair, of desperation. And in this climate, Hitler's message, it resonates.
He's offering simple solutions, scapegoats.
He is. He's saying, look, it's the Jews, it's the communists, it's the weak politicians who brought us to this point. And people, they're desperate for answers, desperate for change.
And he's there,
Yeah.
ready to exploit that desperation.
He is. And that, my friend, is how a rejected artist, a war veteran with extremist views, becomes the dictator who plunges the world into darkness.
It's a chilling reminder, isn't it, of how individual choices, historical circumstances, and the allure of hateful ideologies can converge to create something truly monstrous.
It is.
Yeah.
And it shows us how important it is to understand the past, to learn from it. Because the seeds of hatred, of extremism, they can take root anywhere, at any time. And it's up to us to recognize them, to challenge them. So if you found this deep dive into Hitler's early life insightful, if you appreciate us taking the time to unpack these complex issues, consider supporting our work. Your contributions help us do the research, bring you these stories, and hopefully help us all learn from the past. You can find out more about how to subscribe on our website. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.